As I ring this bowl, relax into this common time and space. Let's acknowledge our gratitude at being together, to be in this beautiful, peaceful, and safe place among our familiar friends of common beliefs and values, to share ideas, thoughts, and concerns. I'm Catherine Brooks, in case you haven't met me yet, and I'm the service leader, and hopefully most of you know Devin Dawson. I want to welcome everybody today, both the folks on Zoom and the people here in the sanctuary. It's kind of exciting because we have more chairs and we can have optional masking, so that's a nice thing, and we get to sing, which is pretty awesome. So our mission of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Chester River is to inspire, inform, and support all who seek spiritual and personal growth, and a more equal and just community. We come together in a spirit of inclusion, and we welcome all. So we have some great announcements this morning. The Stewardship Committee, we're at 92% of our goal. We have a couple people that have promised to still send in their pledge cards, but we're close. So hopefully everybody is going to send those cards in. We also had yesterday a great Precious Metals fundraising event, and they raised $5,780. So they want to thank everybody for their great generosity and supporting the great work of this congregation. And I was here probably about 2 or so, and it was interesting to see all the people dropping off little bags of things to be appraised. So it was a good day. So we appreciate everybody's contribution to that. Another exciting thing is we're having a party today outside. This is going to be the burning of the sock event, which is the spring equinox event. And it's going to be down in the Memorial Garden. And you get to bring all your dirty old socks, as long as they're cotton or wool, so that they don't melt as plastic socks. And it's going to start at 5, and then it will go on to whenever. We are going to have snacks, so if you want to bring some finger food, and there will be some libations provided, I understand. So we'll be outside, though. The offering basket is actually in the table instead of in the back today. So if you have any contributions to that.
We invite us all to say our chalice lighting words now. Catherine will hold it up and I'll light the chalice. We light this chalice
as a symbol of the light within all creation. We light this chalice for truth. May the search for truth be with us always. We light this chalice for love. May the love for others be strong in our hearts. So, this morning. So if you need hymnals, it's number 123. It's the Spirit of Life. Many of you may already know it. I didn't. So Nevin's going to give us a start here.
We invite you to stand. We're going to go ahead and try that. And we invite those with strong voices to help us get started.
Yes. 123.
Well, let's play a short introduction, and then I'll play the melody for you to sing along.
So our opening words today come from Rumi, who's one of my favorite poets. And in following with Sue's sermon today on humanism, I looked up, and there's a very long history of humanism and humanistic philosophy. So I found Rumi, who had some things to say about it. You are more precious than heaven and earth. What more can I say? You do not know your own worth. You are another version of the divine book. You are a mirror of the beauty of God, that God created the universe. Whatever exists in the world, it's not outside of you. You are the treasure of the world, and the world is not half barley. You are the basis of the universe. The universe is fresh because of you. My friend, a human's life is a precious pearl. This life that is created as the most beautiful form precedes the ninth heaven. This life that is the most beautiful form is beyond thought. Therefore, in form, you are the microcosm. Therefore, in reality, you are the macrocosm. Externally, the branch is the origin of the fruit. Intrinsically, the branch came into existence for the sake of the truth. If there had not been desire and hope for the truth, how should the gardener have planted the root of the tree? Therefore, in reality, the tree was born of fruit. Even in appearance, the fruit was generated by the tree.
Thank you, Catherine. And we are going to explore several of our sources today as we think about humanism and the stories of our life. The service today also overlaps with equinox, which will be celebrated this afternoon. Our meditation, our invitation to reflect now starts with that sense of equinox, that sense of balance. These are words from Thomas Rhodes. Over our heads, the great wheel of stars shifts. The spring equinox manifests itself, and for one precious instant, darkness and light exist in balanced proportions to one another. Within our minds, the great web of neurons shifts, new consciousness arises, and for one precious instant, experience and meaning exist together as revelation and epiphany. Within our hearts, the great rhythm of our lives shifts, and a new way of being reveals itself. And for one precious instant, the nexus of the body and the seat of the soul truly exist as one. In this moment, let us give thanks for those times in our life when all seems in balance, for those times are rare and precious. The equinox shall pass, the revelation may be forgotten, and our actions will not always reflect our true selves. But through gratitude, may we remember who we are, reflect on who we may become, and restore that balance which brings equanimity to our lives. Let us take a moment and reflect on this time of balance, this special instant. May the flowers before us, brought with so much grace today, remind us of this moment. We'll now take some time to share our joys and concerns, remembering we do have folks online. So Catherine will lead us through joys and concerns, also called our acknowledgements of the heart. And we'll first do the folks in the room, and then we'll do the folks online.
So you're welcome to come up front this time. And because you're speaking, you don't have to wear your mask. So if anyone has any joys or concerns today, come on up and I'll light a candle for you, for those folks. I'll start with a candle of concern for all the families and frontline workers, as well as those in the congregation who are facing illness, recovery from surgeries or accidents, and the COVID victims. We hold you all in the light. Does anyone have a joy or concern they would like to share?
I'm lighting one for the light.
Great. I have a joy, and that's that this church is incredibly flexible. With David jumping in. Is it David or John? I'm sorry. And listening to his directions from Jim and John Ramsey on the phone as he runs back and forth. That's pretty flexible, that if the tech team goes down, there's people that step in. So I definitely appreciate that among this congregation. Pretty undaunted by changes that hit us.
Anybody online?
Here we go.
Nancy? I have enjoyed. Betty Kerr is here with us today.
Let me just repeat that one because we're not there, but Betty Kerr is here in the sanctuary today, which is making us all very happy. She's recently moved.
In the flesh.
Thank you.
Remembrances of me, and when I couldn't get here, it's a wonderful pleasure to be here again.
And for those online, Betty just acknowledged and gave gratitude as well.
Anybody online have a joy or concern? You can unmute yourself. And while you speak, I'll go ahead and light a candle.
I have a joy.
Great.
My joy is that this afternoon we'll be doing something that we've done for many, many years at UUCR, acknowledging the equinox and celebrating the sock burning. David Newell and Carl Gallegos began it a number of years ago. We get together with song and thoughtfulness and food and wine and all good things and celebrate each other. And so I'm happy that we're still having it down at the Woodlands this afternoon.
Annie, can you explain the significance of burning socks to me?
As this was told to me, that it's a Eastern Shore tradition that the sailors would burn their socks when spring came. It was a sign that spring was here, and they took off their socks, and that was the new season arriving. So not many people know about it, but we do, and we celebrate it.
Is there something in there about they've been wearing the same socks all winter and therefore they have to be burned?
I'm sure.
Okay. All right. Any others from the Zoom folks? Okay. For those joys and concerns shared and those held in our hearts, let's observe a moment of silence. Blessed be.
What to play for you next Amazing Grace. I'm going to play 3 verses, and you're going to be silent on the first 2, but you're welcome to join in on the third. And as a refresher, the lyrics are Amazing Grace. Maybe you can repeat after me. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, now I'm found, was blind, but now I see.
Are all my props ready?
You're talking, Susu.
So we're just doing a tech check, Dave. Everything working fine for the folks online? They seem good? Okay, I want to make sure they can hear me here. So today our topic is simple. Well, it's sort of simple. We're going to talk about humanism, and it's one of the 6 sources of our Unitarian Universalist faith. So I'm going to ask us all to put our teaching hats on. Imagine a youth in the community, maybe a youth right here in the foyer, walked up to you and asked you, what's a humanist? Are you a humanist? How would you answer? I'm thinking back to those young middle school kids that were here about a month ago, and they were asking us about our faith tradition, and Diane Shields was running around trying to find materials. We sent them home with a lot of paper, that's for sure. And they wondered, do you talk about God? I didn't hear it. They hadn't heard it that day. And we said, well, sometimes, but not always. Unitarian Universalism has 7 principles. And often we talk about those 7 principles. Those are posted in our foyer, and they include the obligation of UU congregations to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all, and to affirm the interdependent web of all creation. It sets our aspirations, it describes our values. But day to day, we need a way to live into those values, and that's where the sources come in. There are 6 sources that have been identified over the years. There's probably lots more, and they can come in any forms. They can be readings, they can be poetry, they can be art, they can be that walk you take in the woods. But generally, they summarize the sources to remind us that we need to fill up our picture. We need to be full. And these sources do that. So here's the 6. And this is the short version. It's the direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder, that feeling of awe that we have sometimes. Where are those experiences? The words and deeds of prophetic people. I think we often draw from that. I talked about Thich Nhat Hanh last week. We talk often about folks that have contributed big ideas. Wisdom from the world's religions. You've heard about Rumi today, which is sort of in the branch of the Islamic tradition, but in the more mystical versions, but also with humanist roots. Jewish and Christian teachings, that's closer to the heritage of our faith, and it's listed separately as a separate source. And spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions. What is a better day to think about the earth-centered traditions than the equinox? But then we get to it's actually number 5, but I put it number 6 for this. Today's topic, a source is the humanistic teachings, which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. It is a mouthful. What is a humanist? What is humanism? I know for my husband and I, it was about 30 years ago, we walked into our first UU congregation. I came from I'll call it a suburban Episcopalian background, and he was from a dyed-in-the-wool Congregationalist faith. We were actually one of the few couples I knew that were 2 sort of mainline Protestant traditions getting married, and we had a child, and we were church shopping. We thought we should go to church. Okay, I'm going to be a little more specific. I thought we should go to church. He said he'd come if we could go out to breakfast afterwards. As I said, Nancy, sometimes marriage works that way. So we went to our local Unitarian Universalist church, and it just didn't feel like church. It felt a little bit more like a lecture to me, and we didn't go back, at least not right away. We shopped a little bit more, and well, then 4 years later, I jump you forward. We now had 3 kids, and we tried it again. We were a little bit more patient, and we went to a few services, and we could see a little more of the breadth, and we could hear this focus on ethics and being our best selves. I think maybe what had happened in those years is we had grown up a little bit. We were in our mid-30s, and we now were having questions about how you think about big issues. Maybe we hadn't probably put words quite around this, but these faiths of our childhood, which we weren't uncomfortable with, we weren't bigly rejecting them by any means. Maybe we had a little doubt, or we wondered about those prayers, if God was going to intervene or not. We didn't yet know that probably most of the other folks looked at it differently, but maybe our questions and our doubts were finding this new church home. Were we humanists? It was a few years later, I'd probably been going a couple of years, when I heard that most Unitarian Universalists were in fact humanists. I think that's what I learned. What I understood then, probably not too far from where I understand now, is humanism just didn't center God. Humanism held that we had to depend on one another. The world was messed up. That for sure you heard about every week in the Unitarian Universalist tradition, and it was going to be people that needed to fix it. I think at its broadest sense, I heard humanism as a place where we had to be accountable to one another. So these bits were seeping in. But was I a humanist? Was depending on just one another enough to call it a faith? I think of faith as trust. And was I really willing to just trust other people with the whole condition of the world and my life? I felt it was a question I didn't need to bother answering. I was becoming part of a very specific Unitarian Universalist congregation, and mostly my early years in Unitarian Universalism, I was not upstairs. I was not in the big church upstairs. Sunday school was downstairs. Looking at Connie here, it's so good to see you. And remembering what it's like to be teaching Sunday school. Dave, it looks like we're good. What? I can see a little screen here going, oh, okay. I was teaching Sunday school. It was what Unitarian Universalists call religious education. And I'm virtually sure I'd never heard of the sources. But here's what I was learning in religious education, what we called RE. I was learning what it meant to teach kids how to be in a family, what it meant to teach them about love and belonging. We explored kindness and honesty. I remember a second grader, this would have been in the late 1990s, asking me about the AIDS quilt, which was one of the last times it was laid out on the entire mall in DC. Why did people die? I remember a student, we did Joys and Concerns in a child's version. I remember a kid in 6th grade telling us that he thought his grandmother would probably die the next week. He cried. The other 6th graders listened. I found that God, at least this God that I understood, and this God of love, and I thought of a loving, caring God, just didn't come up much with the kids. Was I teaching them a humanist perspective? Was this listening a humanist outlook on life, this understanding for the 6th grader that his friends were okay if he cried? This humanism that we wonder about has taken on many forms over the centuries for years and years, and there's professors in this room that I know more than I do about this, but I'll take a shot at it back. Kevin's eyes open, we're good. Just kidding, Kevin, just giving you a little hard time. He knew I was talking about him because this is the philosophies he's teaching. During Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries, humanists were advocates for rational thinking. That was the way we were going to solve the problems of the world. Reason and freedom were valued in contrast to myths that were out there, in contrast to some of the ways the institutions of religion were working, but it was even a bigger framework. Technology was offering a better and different understanding of science. Religion, as I understand it, wasn't outside the framework in the Enlightenment, but there was an encouragement to make sure, as you followed a religion, that it felt true to you. It was not good to blindly follow teachings that carried a price, and part of that price could be war, could be many bad things that could happen. Did it feel right to you? If we move forward to the Unitarians in the early 1800s, they connected with these threads, as did all of the American founding of our country. These early Unitarians that were sort of breaking from the Congregationalist church, that church my husband had gone to through his youth, they were not opposed to the Bible or the teachings of Jesus. But clergy and others were encouraging applying a filter and only taking in what squared with experience, reason, and science. There was a skepticism of some God that actually intervened, and God was understood differently as sort of all goodness or all love, at least for some Unitarians. And what was basically happening is on the East Coast, folks held a little more tightly to the Congregationalist faith. And in the West, in the Western and the United States, we had some of the breakout work of some of the Unitarians. We weren't calling it humanism, but experience and reason were eking through every sermon and all of the tradition. And religion doesn't emerge in a vacuum. So another century goes by. We are in the early 20th century after World War I, and folks said, religion is really getting confusing. It is causing potentially harm. And some group, there was were about 30 different leaders, about half of which were Unitarian Universalist ministers, wrote something called the Humanist Manifesto. If anybody ever wants a copy of it, I have the slightly updated version. I found it in one of the books I took out of the library. Basically, what folks were saying in the Humanist Manifesto is we do need to depend on one another, and we do need to be really wary of things that are leading us down bad paths. One description of the manifesto said, it took old attitudes that were involved in worship and prayer, and notes the humanist finds that religious emotions are best expressed with a heightened sense of a personal life and a cooperative effort to promote social well-being. The goal of humanism is a free and universal society in which people voluntarily and intelligently cooperate for the common good. Lots of ways that can be understood, but it puts a lot of pressure on people to get it right if you take it in a sort of a pure form. And we're going to talk a little bit in just a minute about how it gets melded different places. But as we think about humanism, sometimes you hear about secular humanists. Humanists some are atheists, some are agnostic, for the most part, God just isn't that relevant. There can be some polarization between theists and humanists, but for the most part, it's more that the humanists claim that they want to focus on the here and now. Because the other part of humanism and the other part of concern was if there was a focus on an afterlife, then people would miss the mark and not do the work that needs to be done now. One of the groups called secular humanism. So we're going to talk about religious humanism and secular humanism really briefly, but secular humanists, one of the big groups that covers that in the United States is called the American Humanist Association. And they work to protect the rights of humanists, atheists, and other non-theistic Americans. They fight a lot in a good way, like advocate for separation of church and state. And they believe that there is a framing of life without supernatural forces or beliefs in gods that encourages individuals to live an informed and meaningful life and to work for the greater good of humanity. In 2021, what's interesting is the group gave who knows who they gave their award to? Wake you all up. Dr. Fauci. So I think if you look back, and the other thing is, and I can't remember which of the folks, but they also took away an award that had been given 15 or 20 years ago because the person was not affirming trans rights. So it is a place of looking holistically in a framework for looking at life. Religious humanism adds the declaration that we'll do the work better of being better people in community, in groups. It's sometimes called congregational humanism. You know, it's a different language, but to say when we gather here and lift up these principles, it matters to have a structure of accountability. So religious humanism lifts up joys and sorrows together, and this is where UU congregations are often centered. The form is religious in the sense that we are intentional about creating the structure for community, and we believe humanism, again, one of our sources, is best found by doing the work together. Over a generalization here, but humanist and humanism generally values reason and science in contrast to intuition. Yet humanism, that service we attended 30 years ago that we never went back out there, it can feel academic, it can feel cold. But here's where I want to lift up. Humanism is a broad framework. On the this is actually from the Secular Humanist Group. It was on your newsletter this week. It reminds us of a couple things we know, that humanism takes into account critical thinking, ethical development, global awareness, and environmentalism. Probably not a surprise. But humanism isn't just a mere study. It's not just academic. It also lifts up responsibility, participation in society, peace and social justice. And even more, humanism lifts up humility, empathy, altruism. All that relational work is part of humanism. You think you're a humanist? How are you going to answer? Hopefully, if the child my hypothetical child that comes in, they come in soon, so you can repeat all that right now. What's interesting is Harvard just elected their senior chaplain now is Greg Epstein, who's a humanist chaplain and an avowed atheist. And he was interviewed after the Boston Marathon bombing. And he was asked, what do you do as a humanist, in your case as an atheist, when everyone around you is praying? Here's what he said. Well, when people are saying, I'll pray for you, I might say, I'm thinking of you. But more importantly than that, when these kinds of crises affect a humanist community like the ones I work with, and the Boston Marathon directly affected my own community, we act like any other community or congregation in many ways, in the sense that as soon as the marathon bombings took place, we were on the phone with one another, calling all night and all the next day, really to the point of exhaustion. Everyone was trying to figure out, is everyone else in the community okay? Who was hurt? Who was affected? Who's traumatized? How can we reach out to others beyond our community? How can we help? Because in a moment of crisis, what people who are really traumatized by that, we feel helpless. And for humanists, the number one way to overcome a feeling of helplessness is to reach out and help other people. It's part of what human beings need to do, is we need to connect with one another, and we need to work on behalf of something bigger than just ourselves, and even bigger than our individual families. Pretty much sounds like Unitarian Universalist congregations. It's not the only source in our faith, but it is one that has shaped the faith in many ways over the last decade, or I'm sorry, over the last century. But I want to go back to that source. The words from that source are a little bit hard. It says they'll lift up human values, and it's going to, humanism is going to warn us against the idolatries of the mind and spirit. You think of idolatry as extreme love, something over the top. I kept thinking about my 8th grade friend in the Beatles. Definitely idolatry. She was over the top for a year. It's a place of warning. Humanists warn of idolatries, as do most faiths. If we go back to the Hebrew Bible, the golden calf was a distraction from God. So idolatry is common to religion. And the warning here is that we will lose the big picture, we'll lose that accountability to one another if, in fact, we are distracted from what we believe. So I'm wondering, if that teen comes in here and they follow up, does that mean that you don't care about God? Even if God is love, God of energy, do you ignore all that? Are you a humanist? What about the other stories, the mystery? I'm picturing this teen who is walking up to us. They want to categorize. They want to put things in a box to make it understandable. After some deep breathing, where does your heart lead you if you're asked that question? I sense I draw deeply from humanism, and I'm someone who finds a lot of richness in all of the sources. Some folks find one or two of those sources grabs them differently, more powerfully. I think one of the things to hear as we look at the sources is how tempting it is to feel like we need to label things. How much we want to say, are you a humanist? Are you a humanist or not? One of my colleagues, Reverend Amanda Poppy, who's actually the minister now in Arlington, she was at the Washington Ethical Center for 10 years before she came to Arlington. She's a lot younger than I am. And she tells that when she grew up as a Unitarian, she thought humanism was at one end and theism was the other. It was God, supernatural, humanist, which are you? As she worked through the Washington Ethical Center, she talks about how her view as a leader in the culture shifted. She now sees humanism as a broader way of seeing the world, something common to many religions. She says humanism was really an attitude about life, about the human experience. The humanism, she says, I came to realize is about who we are connected to, what we think about each other, and how we work for justice in the world. If folks want to invest in a small book, there's the Unitarian Universalist, there's a lot of these books. This one's Voices in Unitarian Universalism, but you can get one that says Buddhism and Christianity and different places around the sources. And it's reflections of various ministers, and hers is included here. So if someone asks you, are you a humanist? You don't have to answer with yes or no. You can be informed. You can draw as much or as little from the various sources as help you live into the big principles, the values in our lives. I think the message is about humanism today, to being on our game if we're asked. But I think the bigger message is about respect and understanding that each of the sources that are out there means different things to different folks in the room. Different things, different days, different ways you may hear messages. But in that respect, we come and build community together, a community that in crisis checks in on one another. In my case in Arlington, a community that came and ordained me, that laid hands on me, because that is the community that loved me into ministry. Am I a humanist? Am I drawn by humanism? Absolutely. And lots of other things as well. So we end the sermon with a gratitude for the many ways we can draw from sources and live into higher ideals. So many have come before us and pointed us in so many important ways. May it be so. So that is our message today on humanism. What we're going to do now is we're going to sing a hymn, and I think it is difficult enough to sing as first time folks here. So we're going to do Love Will Guide Us. Let's just do, I think, 2 verses. I think there's 4. I think 2 might be a good idea. There's three? Oh, we can do them all. Can we do them all, Nevin? You got us? You got us. Please rise in body or spirit for hymn number 131. And after this, we will have some time for a short discussion.
Introduction.
So this is an opportunity for us to share thoughts and react to what Sue has spoken. So one question I challenge you with, just as a starting point, what are your personal thoughts of where humanism might have come up in your life? You may not have labeled it as such, but hearing what Sue said this morning, do you have a personal story about how humanism affected you?
Connie,
Ready to go to college?
why don't you come to a mic so that we can hear you? You got it. Otherwise, the people online can't hear you.
Some of you remember my mom, Lois Ward. She was a member of this congregation for quite a while. And when I was getting ready to decide what I was going to do, what I was going to go to college for, all she said to me was, make sure what you do will help somebody else. And so I became a teacher, and I've taught here and in living in Chestertown, and I taught for 30 years in New Jersey. And I think that's a very humanistic way to go, to be concerned with children and how they grow and develop their thinking about things. So
I have a story. When I graduated from college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And sort of by default, I started to do community organizing. I'm not sure why. My degree in college was in sociology. And one of the things that I had learned there was that there are definitely different cultures with different needs. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this in other times, but my parents had taken us from Kansas to India, which was quite a leap. Midwest, I didn't know it at the time, but the Midwest was pretty conservative. And it really changed my perspective on the world and the fact that there are people that are less fortunate than us in this country. And I think that was sort of a seed planted in my mind, because when I graduated and tried to, actually before I graduated, I started working for Planned Parenthood. and started to realize the reason I was doing that is because I'd had a bad experience, and I wanted to make sure other women didn't. So that sort of began my career in women's health, and that went on for, I would say, 5 years or so. And then the next step for me was to move to Vermont, which is totally the opposite of Kansas, which was very refreshing to me. And I started working with a group of women, and there were 9 of us that really collaborated closely. We were about the same, I would say, in our mid-20s. And we organized a women's health center, which at the time, this was fairly new when the abortion laws had been passed. So we were bucking the community and the standard doctor community. But as a united group, we were quite strong. And that force of us as women who were intelligent, who were not intimidated, and who were really driven to make a change and offer something, really got us through some tough times. And I would sort of fantasize, what would it be if my father was in the audience of a group of doctors, which we had one day in the Unitarian Church, who were fighting us, basically saying, you can't do this. You don't have the skills. You don't know what it is you need to do. And we just kind of shook our heads and said, well, we'll figure it out. And they were just like, they went to medical school and they'd been in practice for decades. And that was a very empowering experience for me in how important it is to listen to your community and to get involved in your community. And I knew coming into Chestertown that was going to be something I needed to do. And I also knew that that's one of the principles of Unitarianism. And that's why I came here. And I just keep stepping my foot in other things here, which I really enjoy and makes me feel like part of the community. So those values of we as the people have to take action is so strong in this church. It really makes me feel like I'm in the right place.
Anybody else? Marilee.
Oh, I get to take this off, don't I? This is just sort of a tangent, but when I hear the word humanism, I think I was raised in it. I was also raised in evangelicalism, God help me. But the last few years of my life, I've gotten to live on the water-ish in the woods, and where John and I are alone most of the time, especially the last couple of years we've been alone. And I've learned so much from the non-humans. And that's just what I wanted to say, the eagles and the buzzards and the crabs and the wind. And so most of my life, I think I was told that humans could give us everything. And recently, another source has come blowing.
So as we wind down, Marilee brings up one of the things I wanted to touch base on is how humanism is changing. So the big one I brought up is it's not this or that. Humanism is seen more as roots of many, many things. The other question that's being raised in many circles is it helpful to center humans in the way that humanism did? So precisely the point that Marilee made is being sort of questioned in a humanistic look. And I think a lot of folks that would identify strongly with the source are strong environmentalists, look at life in a very holistic manner. And the titling is interesting to have put humanism back there. So that is one of the major changes over the last couple of decades as people question humanism. So I think with that, I think we started a little late, but we're winding down. I'm going to offer our closing words. Then we will extinguish the chalice. We will do our best. We're going to depend on who knows, go lift it up the best, Nancy. Nancy will start us on Go Lift It Up, which is our sung benediction. And then Nevin will offer a postlude. Closing words, extinguished chalice, sung benediction, postlude. We got it. We close lifting up balance in our lives. We close not wanting to be in boxes. May we go forth from here, ready to do the work the world needs together, to take care of one another, to take care of ourselves, to take care of the planet, and to appreciate the many ways all of this comes together. Go in love, go in peace, go knowing love surrounds you wherever you may go. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of it. We carry in our hearts until we meet again. Go lifted up, thou best your way. My starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day.
St. Louis Blues. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
have a great week. And for folks attending tonight, enjoy. It'll be great.